The Percy Jackson books are one of my favorite series. I read them for the first time 4 years ago, and I have not looked back. Given the fact that I had multiple read-throughs, I thought it would be fun to go over each Rick Riordan book and rank them from worst to best. For this video though, we're only focusing on the Camp Half-Blood books, so we're not going over the Magnus Chase novels or the Kane Chronicles. I also chose to leave out the add-on books like the Demigod Files, the Demigod Diaries, Greek Gods, and so on. This means we're going through 17 different books. Also, spoiler warning. If you enjoy this video, hit that like button. It will greatly help the channel with the algorithm. And if you like what you see, hit that subscribe button. And you can also follow me on all of my other social medias, all of which are linked down below, and all of which house similar content that I make here on this channel. Now that I've said that, let's get the video started. Coming in last place at number 17 is The Dark Prophecy. This is the second book in the Trials of Apollo series, and I'm not gonna lie, this book almost made me stop reading the rest of the Rick Riordan novels. I struggled to get through it, and actually put it down for an entire month before I went back to it and finally finished it. With that being said, I did end up enjoying it, just as I enjoy all of Rick Riordan's novels. The final battle at the way station was thrilling and definitely made up for the beginning of the book that made me lose interest. However, I felt that this novel lacked the classic humor that these books are so known for, and for that and many other reasons, it's definitely at the bottom of the list for me. In 16th place, I'm putting the first novel in the Heroes of Olympus series, The Lost Hero. To be honest, this book is a big step up from The Dark Prophecy. If The Dark Prophecy is all the way down here, The Lost Hero is all the way up here with the rest of the Camp Half-Blood novels. However, this book just didn't resonate with me the way the other books in the franchise did. I found it hard to latch on to Jason, Piper, and Leo at first, but of course by the end of the novel I definitely did care about these characters. Honestly though, I think one of the big reasons why this ranks so low is because it's the first novel without Percy Jackson. This was of course the first novel released after the original 5 books that were from Percy's point of view. The change in writing style also took a bit of time to get used to, which also might have played on why it's placed so low. We went from Percy's POV to other characters' point of view, and the chapters were much shorter. Eventually I got used to this and actually grew to like this writing style, but because it was the first, I don't like change. So I guess this book sort of unfairly took a hit for that, but I'm trying to remember how I felt the first time I read these novels, and that's just how I felt. Coming in 15th place, we have The Hidden Oracle. This book was a good opening to the Trials of Apollo series, and it immediately made me like Apollo as a character. It was obviously fun to see Percy in the beginning of the book, which sort of passed the torch on to Apollo. Personally, I think I latched onto Apollo faster than I did to Jason, Piper, and Leo in The Lost Hero. Though as the Heroes of Olympus series progressed, I far preferred Jason, Leo, and Piper. In The Hidden Oracle though, it was really interesting to see Apollo, who was an arrogant god that we had seen in past books, as he began to grasp the depths of morality, which I think was one of the biggest selling points for this book for me. However, when compared to the other Rick Riordan books, this one just doesn't stack up. And that's not because this one is bad, it's just because everything else is so good. At number 14, I have The Sea of Monsters. This might be a hot take, but even though The Sea of Monsters is one of the OG books in the franchise, looking back, I think it's one of the weakest. Again, it's not because it's bad, but rather because it just doesn't stand toe-to-toe with the other books in the franchise. I think I far prefer it to the 3 books ranked below it, mainly because it's written in my favorite format, that being from Percy's point of view. But even with that, for me, it fell short of the other books in the franchise. It did have many things I enjoyed in it though, like the addition of Tyson, the scenes with Luke on the boat, and the final battle when the centaurs come in. However, I found the plot with Clarice to be wearing, and I felt that some of the comedy didn't land the same way as other Riordan books. At number 13, I have The Tyrant's Tomb. This book was good and was just a hair better than The Sea of Monsters. I went back and forth between those two, but I think this one is better. Jason being brought back to Camp Jupiter as well as his funeral bumped it up a bit, especially because of how much Jason touched that camp during his life. I also loved Frank's sacrifice, and I fully believed he was gone, and that's actually one of my gripes with this book. I felt that the explanation for Frank coming back was a little too convenient, especially after his life force had been such a big part of his character arc since the moment he was introduced. Just disregarding all of that previous story disappointed me a bit. However, the good outweighed the bad for me in this book. I love the addition of Lavinia. She became a standout character for me that I latched onto right away. Apollo getting his godly bow was also a great moment. And most of all, I think this book is where Apollo grew as a person more than any of the other books in the Trials of Apollo series, dealing with grief, anger, and coming to understand what mortals and demigods go through. At number 12, I'm putting The Blood of Olympus, which might surprise some people, but maybe not. I felt that the Heroes of Olympus series was the strongest series of books that Riordan ever wrote, but at times, the ending kind of challenges that for me. I felt that this book was incredibly rushed. I think there was just too much to wrap up in the span of one book, and as many fans have pointed out online, it might have been a good idea to add a 6th book to wrap this up. Most agree that this was the weakest end out of the 3 5-part series. This book still kicks ass though, and it was definitely a good read. Leo's sacrifice was magnificently done, and the back and forth between all of the different groups going to the same location for the final battle was a great touch on Riordan's part. I was happy with the ending, but I think it would have been more satisfying if Rick added an extra book. At number 11, I have The Sun and the Star. This is one of the newer books, and I honestly really enjoyed it. I find it funny how many bad reviews this book got, simply because of its focus on 2 gay characters, as well as making Piper, a character we've known for a while, enter a relationship with another girl. If you look at the reviews, it's definitely skewed for that reason, but most true fans agree that this was a really good read. Heading back to Tartarus was a great plotline for Nico given his parentage, and the relationship between Nico and Will is one of the best parts of this book. The moment that meant the most to me though was Nico having his father Hades, his mother Maria, and his sister Bianca all visit him, praising him and telling him to enjoy his happy future with the person he loves. Though it was a good read, it doesn't reach top tier for me, which is why I had to put it outside of the top 10. Reaching the top 10, I'm putting The Chalice of the Gods. Chalice of the Gods is another newer book, and I really enjoyed this one. Going back to the original 3 with Percy, Grover, and Annabeth was a real treat. The chemistry these 3 have is very palpable, and it seems like they picked up right where they left off. It was a shorter book than most in the series. I believe it was the shortest out of all of them. But even so, it did not feel like it was rushed, nor did it feel like it lacked any depth. This is the first in a 3-part series, and I'm excited to see where it goes from here. At number 9, I'm putting The Tower of Nero. This was the second best climax to the 3 5-part series, and it definitely didn't feel like The Blood of Olympus that, as I said, was very rushed. Apollo's transformation from a self-centered god to a compassionate and selfless mortal reaches its climax in a very satisfying way. It also ends with a very thrilling battle that wraps up the series well. Seeing Apollo return to Mount Olympus, being welcomed back as an Olympian was a great moment after following his story for the past 5 books. I really grew to care for his character, and seeing his progression come to an end was very fulfilling. Number 8 is The Burning Maze. This book is action-packed and does not hold back whatsoever. We have another big sacrifice. This one is by far the most impactful though, as Jason, a character we've known for the last 8 books, is killed in the most heroic way possible. On top of that, we revisit the Labyrinth, which was of course the center of the 4th book in the franchise, and we get to see Grover play a big role in the plot for the first time in a while. On top of that, it brings loads of characters from the Heroes of Olympus series back, all holding big roles in the plot, which made this book resonate with me even more. This is for sure my favorite book in the Trials of Apollo series. At number 7, I'm putting The Mark of Athena. Seeing the 7 demigods come together and start their mission was really entertaining, especially seeing how they all get along or don't get along. It was also great to see Percy and Annabeth back together for the first time since The Last Olympian. On top of that, I really enjoyed seeing Annabeth's point of view for the first time, because we followed her character for so many books, but always saw her from the point of view of other characters. This novel is really Annabeth's, especially with the climax where she faces Arachne. And we can't forget about that crazy cliffhanger. That's up there with one of the craziest cliffhangers I've ever read in a book. Coming in at number 6, I have The Battle of the Labyrinth. This was our first introduction to the Labyrinth, and it was a hell of a spectacle with all of the different things they faced. I think the sequence in the maze makes this one of the most thrilling novels in the franchise, which absolutely pushed it up in the ranking. One of the best parts about this book for me though was getting to see more of Rachel Elizabeth Dare. I think this is the book that had more of her character than any other novel in the series, which makes me really happy as someone who loves Rachel's character. Getting to the top 5, I have the Son of Neptune. Not only do we get Percy back after he was completely absent from the book before this one, but we also learn more about a completely different camp besides Camp Half-Blood. Adding Camp Jupiter to this world was so fascinating, and honestly, it brought me back to the first book when we were first introduced to Camp Half-Blood. Camp Jupiter is even more amazing though, as it basically has the city of Rome, or New Rome as they call it, and it's a place where demigods can actually live their lives past being a kid without being in danger. On top of that, we meet Frank, who is honestly one of my favorite characters in the franchise. I also love his relationship with Hazel, and I far prefer this pairing over the other Heroes of Olympus couple, Jason and Piper. I flew through this book the first time I read it, and it absolutely belongs in the top 5 for me. At number 5, I have The Lightning Thief, the book that started it all. This is what got me hooked on this world, and I haven't looked back. After reading all of the other books and going back to this one, you realize it's incredibly simplistic, but that's one of the things that makes it so nostalgic for me. It introduced us to the main cast in the best way possible, immediately making me care about every character. And one of the best parts for me was the ending where we find out that Luke was a traitor. It was the first book to end with a plot twist and cliffhanger, which the series has become so famous for. Without this book, we wouldn't have the rest of the novels on this list, which definitely pushed it up in the ranking. Reaching the top 3, I'm putting The Titan's Curse. I've always loved this one, and it was one of the most fun reads I had in the whole franchise, and that's saying something. One of my favorite things about this book is how it changed the franchise, making it much darker. I also found Percy's desperation to find Annabeth very gripping and very touching. The ending of this book is what really made it be this high though. It has so much emotion, with Thalia and Luke facing off after all of the history they have. Then we have Zoe Nightshade facing her father Atlas and ultimately losing her life. It's absolutely one of the best endings to a book in the entire franchise. At number 2, I have The Last Olympian. This was the perfect wrap up to the original 5 books, and it's my favorite from the original series. It gave us a hell of a final battle that progressed every character's development in some way or another. The couple we've been rooting for to get together for the entire series finally gets together, Luke switches sides and sacrifices himself, Grover leads all the nature spirits, Thalia returns with the Hunters of Artemis, Rachel becomes the Oracle, Clarice deals with the loss of her best friend, and there's so much more. This book gives us a very satisfying ending to the original series. You honestly could not have asked for anything more. And finally at number 1, I have The House of Hades. This was the book I could not put down. I read it faster than every single book in the series, and that's saying something because it is the longest one with 597 pages. Following Percy and Annabeth's journey through Tartarus was my favorite sequence throughout the entire series. I just can't get enough of it. It strengthens their relationship tenfold and made me fall in love with this couple even more than before, which I didn't even think was possible. We had of course heard about Tartarus for the last 9 books, and it was always painted as a place that was the most horrible thing in the world. So to finally see this awful place and to follow arguably the 2 biggest characters in the series, it was something that I found really captivating. Well, that was my favorite part of this book, and honestly my favorite part of any Rick Riordan book in general. There were also some other really interesting stories for the other characters as well. This includes another one of my favorite scenes in the franchise, that being Nico coming out as gay and admitting that he liked Percy. I love how it took you through pivotal moments in the past books and gave us a new perspective on all of the Nico and Percy scenes. This is by far my favorite Rick Riordan book. But that's my opinion. Please let me know in the comments below what you think of my ranking, and also give me your ranking as well. Start some conversations in the comments, reply to people, and just have fun with it. That's all I have for you guys today though, so I will see you in the next video.